moment Alexandra Eala's name appeared in the Italian Open draw, Rome's ticketing engine started rewriting its own profit margins. Premium seats for the finals climbed to 2,063 euros, not gradually, not after results. The second her entry was confirmed. That's not coincidence. That's a pricing algorithm responding to the most commercially disruptive force in women's tennis right now. And here's what the tennis establishment still hasn't said out loud. The player causing all of this is ranked number 44 in the world.
The last time I was here, which years ago, I think I've changed a lot, grown a lot. It's nice to see the welcome that I've had. There's a huge Filipino community here, so I'm so excited.
Let's start with the metric that stopped media analysts cold. During the lead-up to the 2026 clay court season, a press conference featuring Alexandra Eala recorded 171,000 views on official digital platforms. A comparable session with Novak Djokovic, 24 Grand Slam titles, 3 decades of global dominance, drew 80,000. That's a 113.75% viewership advantage for a 20-year-old from Quezon City, Philippines, who hadn't set foot on a court in Rome yet. Analysts didn't call it an anomaly. They called it a demographic signal. Hard proof that the audience driving tennis viewership in 2026 is not the same crowd that made Djokovic a legend. Tournament directors across Europe took note. FITP President Angelo Banaghi took note most of all, because Banaghi isn't just running a tennis tournament in 2026, he's running an infrastructure project, a luxury brand repositioning, and an open campaign to make the Italian Open a 5th Grand Slam. That 171,000 view press conference told him exactly whose name needed to be at the center of it. But what happened next, nobody publicly predicted.
I've always had a dream that kind of like when I'm in a red carpet, I'll wear what's called the Filipiniana, and it's a very traditional Filipino formal wear. It's perfect.
Before Rome, there was Melbourne, and Melbourne gave every tournament director in the world a case study they never asked for. On January 19, 2026, Alexandra Eala was scheduled on Court 6 at the Australian Open, a small outside court, the kind reserved for lower priority matches. What followed became one of the most discussed logistical failures of the entire 2026 tennis season. Thousands of fans, largely from the Filipino community, showed up hours in advance. Court 6 hit capacity fast. People were pushed into outdoor viewing areas, watching on large screens in what eyewitnesses called fierce heat. Wait times at the ground's entry point stretched to roughly 2 hours. The hashtag #MinimistDalawan spread across social media. Fans weren't just venting, they were making a business argument. Filipino player equals high demand for ticket sales. Simple as that. Novak Djokovic, when asked about it, admitted the scheduling might have been poor, but called the chaos a good problem. A sign the sport was healthy. What Djokovic saw as healthy appetite, tournament directors saw as something more urgent. An unplanned revenue event they'd failed to monetize, and a crowd management failure they couldn't let happen again. Rome took note, but the fix Rome chose came with its own consequences.
And support in Indian Wells. Look at this. I mean, this was in Australia. Court 6 literally had a line. I know I'm exaggerating, but it went for miles at the Aussie. It was wild scenes there. Ali, can you remember a women's star who gets this type of support wherever she goes?
Yeah, well, Taylor Swift. I mean,
Yeah.
The Italian Open didn't land at 2,063 euros final session tickets by accident. There's a very specific financial logic behind it. Angelo Banaghi poured 160 million euros into infrastructure at the Foro Italico and along the Lungotevere, 21 courts, a brand new super tennis arena, and a publicly stated goal of breaking the century-long monopoly held by the 4 existing Grand Slams. That's not a renovation, that's a challenge. To justify that investment, the FITP built what analysts have called a premiumization strategy, repositioning the Italian Open as a luxury event, the kind that sits alongside Wimbledon and Roland Garros rather than beneath them. Ground entry on the secondary market started around 70 euros. Central court day sessions in the first round hit between 120 euros and 274 euros. Quarterfinals ran from 300 euros to 550 euros. Category 2, general seating reached $765. The premium West Side Distinti Monte Mario seats, sun at your back, best sight lines in the house, climbed to $985. And at the very top, 2,063 euros for central court at the finals. Benaghi's federation has called this a success story, evidence that the Italian Open has grown into the commercial weight it always deserved. But here's what that success story doesn't fully explain. The demand fueling those 2,063 euro seats isn't just Jannik Sinner. It isn't just Jasmine Paolini. The viewership data, the Melbourne crowd behavior, the press conference numbers, they all trace back to one engine. A player ranked number 44 in the world, preparing at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, working daily under coaches Joan Bosch, Luc Bauza, and Sandro Viane, with Tony Nadal overseeing the strategy. Now here's the number that puts everything else in perspective. On January 29, 2026, the inaugural Philippine Women's Open was held in Manila, a tournament built specifically around the commercial pull of Alexandra Eala and the passion of the Philippine tennis market. Finals tickets, 2,000 pesos converted to euros, that's approximately 32 euros. The Italian Open's premium finals ticket that same calendar year, 2,063 euros. That's not a price gap. That's a 64-to-1 ratio. Same player, same year. Two completely different tournaments staking their commercial value on her name and charging 64 times more in Rome than in Manila to watch her compete. When you look at Benaghi's premiumization strategy through that lens, a question surfaces that the federation hasn't directly answered. When a tournament prices its finals at 64 times what the player's own country charges to see her, what exactly is being sold at that point, the tennis or the access to a phenomenon? For ordinary Italian fans, the answer wasn't subtle. With Central court sessions starting at 120 euros and finals clearing 2,000 euros, large parts of the domestic Italian audience have been quietly redirected from the Foro Italico to the Super Tennis streaming platform, which, not coincidentally, the federation also controls. The live experience in Rome has become something reserved for a category of buyer that most Italian sports fans simply aren't. And that's when the regulators stepped in.
I'd have to say maybe a little bit of Sonia Mirza. Back in her heyday, obviously the Indian fans took to her and they followed her all around the globe, obviously not to this extent. And I think the ceiling that Alex Eala has is obviously that much higher. And I'm gonna bring in a little boxing here because my dad wanted me to be a boxer, but I chose tennis. But Manny Pacquiao.
Good call.
Manny Pacquiao, we saw him when he, was at the top of his game. And alongside Roger Federer, he actually had more prize money. So I think that if Eala, can keep doing well with her tennis, who knows? The sky's the limit on the court, off the court. I mean, she could be rolling in it, if you will.
Yeah.
In 2025, heading into the 2026 pricing cycle, the Italian Competition Authority, the AGCM, deployed a mechanism called moral suasion against the FITP. And what they targeted wasn't the headline ticket prices, it was what buyers weren't being told. The AGCM found that consumers purchasing Italian Open tickets weren't being clearly informed of mandatory service fees at the start of the transaction. Those fees ranged from €1.50 all the way up to 7% of the ticket price. On a 2,063 euro ticket, a 7% service fee adds €144 and 41 cents to the final total, an amount that wouldn't appear until checkout. The authority flagged this as a potential violation of Articles 20, 21, and 22 of the Italian Consumer Code, the provisions specifically covering unfair commercial practices and misleading omissions. The FITP was compelled to update its entire web infrastructure, so the exact service fee for every ticket category was visible from the very first step of the purchase. The Federation complied. It did not admit wrongdoing, it complied. which means the same pricing structure that triggered the investigation is fully operational for the 2026 edition. What the AGCM really exposed wasn't just a technical transparency problem. It was the distance between how the Italian Open presents itself publicly, a tournament celebrating tennis's growth, welcoming fans into a historic fifth Grand Slam moment, and how the financial mechanics actually work at the checkout screen. Here's the part the tournament economics struggle to explain. Alexandra Eala, as of April 2026, is ranked number 44. She's not a top 10 seed, she's not a defending champion. Her only previous appearance at the Italian Open ended in a 0-6, 1-6 defeat to Marta Kostyuk, a result observers described plainly as brutal. By every conventional measure of how tournament commercial value gets assigned, a player at number 44 with a first-round exit in her only Rome appearance shouldn't be driving the pricing architecture of a €160 million investment, and yet the numbers say otherwise. Former French Open champion Ana Ivanovic reached for a boxing analogy to describe what Eala does to a room. She compared the energy to Manny Pacquiao, not because of rankings, but because of the electricity that builds before a single point is played. Her words: "When she walks onto that court, every eye in the tennis world is going to be watching. She makes the whole world watch." World number 5, Jessica Pegula said the crowd atmosphere around Eala at the Miami Open was unlike anything she'd experienced for a player still on the rise. Eala herself, during her 2025 Rome debut, mentioned running into Filipinos 5 separate times just walking the streets of the city. That's not a fan base. That's a diaspora that travels. Tournament directors are now factoring that community into attendance projections exceeding 350,000 spectators for the 2026 edition. The performance data backs it too. Her 2026 season win rate sits at 63.63%, ahead of Jasmine Paolini's 53.33%, ahead of Naomi Osaka's 62.5%, ahead of Madison Keys' 61.5% across the same stretch. She's the only player outside the top 20 to reach the round of 16 in 3 of the first 4 major tournaments of the year. Her win rate against top 10 opponents is 57%, a number that barely makes sense for someone ranked where she is. The reality is Rome's pricing machine isn't reading her ranking, it's reading her engagement data. And those are 2 entirely different calculations, one built by the WTA's algorithm, the other built by a commercial ecosystem running on completely different logic. Former British number 1 Greg Rusetsky has acknowledged it openly, noting that Eala's heavier losses against harder hitters are a necessary step in her development. The ceiling is real. The senior voices in the sport see it. But the question that's harder to answer is whether a pricing structure built on her market impact can sustain itself if the on-court results don't catch up fast enough. That's the sharp edge of the hype versus results debate, and nobody in Rome is rushing to answer it.
She's got a smile that lights up a room too, you know. And I remember last year when she beat Iga Swiatek, and she kind of did it with a lot of grace and humility, you know. And it was really, for me, it was terrific to see her take that match and watch her play after that, and watch her try to continue to progress. Because I like her game, you know. Obviously, she wants to get better than where she is now, the 32 in the world, but she's got a lot of good hand-eye coordination and ability to take the ball early and redirect. But the fan stuff is always fun for me, because whenever you see players from smaller countries, the fans are so passionate when they get up to the top.
It's interesting, Ali mentioned Sonia Mirza. She has nearly 13 million followers on Instagram. That's 5 million more than Carlos Alcaraz, and nearly as many as Alcaraz and Sabalenka combined. So that's how big Sonia Mirza is, was, and will be. But Eala going to be seeded for the first time at a 1,000. To find out who she will play in the second round, check out the draw.
By late April 2026, Alexandra Eala was back at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, finalizing her preparation for Rome. The Italian Open confirmed record-breaking attendance expectations for the 2026 edition. Binaghi's 5th Grand Slam infrastructure is standing. The AGCM's transparency requirements are technically satisfied. The Super Tennis Arena is open. The free training court at Piazza del Popolo is available, a gesture toward accessibility inside a tournament that charges €2,063 for its best seat in the house. The 171,000 view press conference is documented. The Court 6 breakdown in Melbourne is on record. The 64-to-1 ticket price ratio between Manila and Rome is a confirmed data point. The hashtag Minimis Dilawan is part of the public record now. Every euro of that €160 million investment, every pricing tier, every legal exchange with the AGCM, every infrastructure decision, all of it was calibrated around one assumption: that the demand holds, that the phenomenon shows up and delivers. So here's the question Rome hasn't answered. What happens to all of it? The premium pricing, the record attendance projections, the fifth Grand Slam narrative. If the player generating the demand walks off the court in round one?